Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 13th annual Behind the Music panel with WonderCon. I'm Jana Davidoff, and this is Alex Beck, and we're with Rhapsody PR. It's hard to believe that a year later, we're still doing this from home, but we are so excited to have you tune in from the comfort and safety of your homes. Before I introduce our incredible moderator and talented panelists, I'd like to take a moment to thank Eddie, Laura, Adam, and the entire WonderCon team for finding a way to give you all a wonderful WonderCon experience from home. Now, on to our panelists. First, he is a Grammy-nominated composer who won the Emmy for his work on Fargo. He also scores shows such as FX's Legion, CBS's Clarice, and CBS All Access's Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Discovery. Please welcome Jeff Russo. Yay! Okay. Next, she's the Emmy-nominated composer for her work on PBS's Victoria, Netflix's Golden Globe-nominated drama series Bodyguard, and BBC One's recently released Bloodlands. Please welcome Ruth Barrett. Yay! Yay. Next, the composer of Oscar frontrunner Pixar short Piper, Disney Plus's Forky Asks a Question, and recently released Flora and Ulysses. Please welcome Jake Monaco. Yay! Yay. Okay, next, she is the Emmy-nominated composer of Apple TV's Home, BET 20s, and Freeform's Love in the Time of Corona. Her Emmy nomination gives her the distinction of being the first Black woman to receive an Emmy nomination in the score category. Please welcome Amanda Jones. Yay! Yay. Next, he is the composer of Focus Features' Golden Globe nominated film, Promising Young Woman, which is so good, and DreamWorks Animation's How to Train Your Dragon to Homecoming, and the upcoming animated film Hump. Please welcome Anthony Willis. Yay! Yep. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Emmy-winning composer of hit shows such as Marvel's Jessica Jones, Showtime's Homeland, and Fox's 24. His music was most recently heard in The Marksman and Fox's Next. He won Marvel's first Emmy ever. Please welcome Sean Callery. Yay! Yay. And now our moderator. You'll recognize her as Lieutenant Kayla Detmer on Star Trek Discovery. Please welcome Emily Coutts. Woo! Hi, girl.
Hello. I'm very, very excited to be here today and be with these incredible artists who've come together to share how important music is to the creation of some of our favorite fictional worlds. And I actually just had my first experience personally working with a composer on my first short film, which was a very exciting and difficult and like a big learning curve for me. So I'm very excited to hear about all of your different processes and how you approach the work. So let's jump in and start with Jeff. Season 3 of CBS's Star Trek Discovery introduces 2 new characters like Adira, Lou Del Barro, and Gray, Ian Alexander. Can you talk to us about how the musical themes develop and how you come up with these musical themes for each new character?
First, it's great to see you. It's been a while. You know, it was a really interesting time writing themes for the new characters on this season of Star Trek. Those 2 in particular, I got to get a really big head start because Michelle called me and said that there's this cello melody that's going to happen throughout the season, and could I write it before they shoot it so that you know, because they had to play. I needed to write a piece of music for them so they could play on screen. So that sort of began the process of writing their themes. That was a lot of fun to do, and it really gives me the opportunity to really sort of try to flesh things out with that. And I wrote a couple of different versions of it before I felt really good about it, and before I even sent it to Michelle and Alex. And once they sort of got on board, then that theme sort of became other pieces in the show, and lasted for the rest of the season. A lot of the themes, a lot of the characters that had come from season 2 also needed new themes. Lieutenant Detmer, for instance, at the beginning of the season, you suffer from a sort of a PTSD, and there was really the need to sort of accentuate that with music as well. So there's a lot of different thematic elements still had to be sort of worked from season 2 into season 3. But that's that's the fun part to me.
Cool. Okay, Amanda, your score for Cartoon Network's Adventure Time Distant Lands special Obsidian has a really interesting mix of orchestral music and EDM, electronic dance music, which is very interesting. Can you tell us how that sort of combo came to be?
Yeah. So, when I had initial conversations with the creatives, they wanted to kind of go bigger with an orchestral sound. Their previous series was very much kind of like EDM, like beatboxing and just like drum machine vibes. But for these hour-long specials they're doing for HBO Max, they wanted to kind of go bigger, but also still incorporate some of those elements of the original series. So, and then there's also like an indie rock and roll element, which is really fun. There's one of the characters plays a bass, and it's like she's a witch, vampire witch, and her broom is like a bass guitar. So it was really fun being able to incorporate that into the score. But yeah, I think the director just wanted to kind of do a lot of different things with the hour-long special, and so we were able just to bring in a lot of this EDM elements that were like reminiscent of the original series, but we made it huge, and like the stakes were really crazy with this orchestral elements, and then there's just kind of like this indie / like grunge / punk element just because of the nature of the lead character, Marceline, the vampire witch. So it was like I don't know, just a medley of different types of sounds and textures, but it was a lot of fun to work on.
Well, I'm going to actually ask you more about that character who plays the bass in the upcoming questions. I'm excited to hear more about that. So Jake, we'll move on to you. You're no stranger for scoring animation, whether it be features or series. And so how would you say your approach for composing music for animation differs from composing for live action? Is there a difference?
There is a little bit of a difference. I've gotten this question a couple times, and it's funny, every time I think about it, my answer changes a little bit. But for me, I think it's more about the age group and the demographic that you're trying to reach. With a lot of the animated shows that whether I've been going out for or have been a part of, the running theme and the running direction seems to be we want to age it up, and we don't want to dumb the music down because kids are smart. They can understand what's going on. Everything doesn't need to be bloop, 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 for them to understand it. And I think it's great to be able to think of an animated film or a series of shorts or whatever as just as much as a blockbuster, and score it like that, score it as such. I think the bigger difference comes in when you're talking about like scoring a preschool animated show versus maybe a 6 to 12 or above, or a family oriented animated film. With preschool, I think the psychology behind it is really interesting. And I'm working on this show called Do, Re, and Me. It's a music theory show for preschoolers that's going to start coming out in May. And it's just great to be able to see all of the thought that goes into how to connect all of these characters, how to introduce these genres to kids. And, really it's a learning tool as opposed to an entertainment tool almost. So I think that's more of the difference for me than necessarily animation just versus live action.
Cool. All right, we've got one for Anthony. I'm so excited to meet you because I just watched Promising Young Woman and it is so amazing. And we will be rooting for you at the Globes.
Oh, thank you.
It is a purposely provocative film in which the main character, Cassie, played by Carey Mulligan, seeks revenge following a traumatic event in which she lost her best friend, Nina. Now, Nina never appears in the film, but her presence is very much felt throughout the movie. How did you go about this musically to, support the sense that she is there and she is still a part of the story in the present day?
Well, I mean, I was so lucky that what you realize when you watch the movie is that Carey Mulligan's performance so brilliantly captures this role that Emerald wrote, which is a woman whose life is completely stopped. All the things, which is why the movie is called what it is. A woman who would have had such a different life had this event not happened to her friend. So every scene that Carey's in, she's living this like sense of purgatory. And that said, when Emerald asked me to write a theme for her, she was like, what can you do to kind of bring a through line to her journey? And so the way I thought about it was to write a theme for their friendship and then darken that. So basically there's this sort of, subverted friendship that runs through the movie, that the friendship that never was, or that, could no longer be. And then obviously, like the pop vocal is such a dominant color in the rest of the film and all the amazing songs that are in the movie. So we came up with like a pad for Nina that was like built out of a vocal, so that sits there quite eerily with the strings, so it kind of added like a haunted flavor to it. So that was really, that was my way to bring Nina into the film.
Amazing. Yeah, we're going to dig a little further into the pop themes of that movie, which I found really, really amazing how you guys did that. Next question will be for Ruth. How did you first get involved in scoring your latest projects, which is BBC's Badlands, and how was the musical approach determined? How did those conversations sort of start?
We didn't really have a conversation because I've worked with the director before. So he didn't give me much of a brief, but I had a look at some of the first assemblies that they'd done, and they were filming out in Northern Ireland, in Belfast. So this thing is called Bloodlands, and it's starring James Nesbitt, if you know of him. And it's kind of like the IRA is a bit of a backdrop to it, but it's essentially about a cop who's on the hunt for his wife's killer. So his wife's murdered 20 years ago, and it's been haunting him. So it's like a personal story, but it's got the IRA thing going on in the background. And it's got this amazing scenery, like the Mourns in Ireland. It's all quite bleak and moorsy. So I was thinking about that as an inspiration, and that the IRA stuff sort of reminds me a little bit of almost like a Western or something. That was what it was saying to me at the time. But I thought, hey, let's go to Belfast and see some of the filming. But that's generally quite boring to just watch. So I thought, right, I'll find some Irish musicians. And I'd just been working on a show called Sanditon. So one of the guitarist on that, he could hop over from Scotland, and he's actually Irish. So he brought his guitars, we went to a studio. The guy there is brilliant and played the fiddle. We got some pipes and whistle player in and played some themes that I just kind of wrote to the picture without much guidance. And then I was really like buzzing off this session. Then it went to the set to see the director, who's Pete Travis. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm recording all this stuff. He's like, oh, like, what are you doing? Whatever you do, just make sure it's expletive, not Irish. Make sure you don't do Irish music. So I was like, okay. Yeah, I won't tell you about the pipes and the whistles and the fiddle and the guitars and stuff. Yeah, it's all like kind of, he's like, think it's Paris, Texas. I was like, okay, we're on the same vibe. At least I'm doing, it's a Western thing, but I kind of played down the Irish elements. But what it did do, and it never ended up sounding Irish at all in the end, it just gave it a flavor and a sense of the place, and a kind of just this kind of moody feeling, because with the IRA, there's a few things that go on. There's a car bomb, and there's kind of a sense of like, if someone's been killed, then there's going to be an eye for an eye, you know. So I wanted to just get this sort of sense of this invisible threat out there. So it's quite a moody, ominous kind of score, which is really fun.
Amazing. I just imagine the fiddle player just like slowly stopping fiddling as you're like, no, rein it in.
Rein it in, yeah. Take out the twiddles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sean, you recently scored action thriller The Marksman, starring Liam Neeson, which was #1 at the box office for 2 straight weeks since its release day. Woo woo. How is scoring this film different from scoring your TV shows like Marvel's Jessica Jones, Fox's 24, and Next?
Well, they wanted an entirely Irish score, which was great. So that just
Should have called me.
What's the problem with Irish music, Canada? Well, Liam Neeson, you know, when I was asked to do it, I was just excited because it was set in this very open southern border town, and with the film, it has a little bit more liberty with pacing and so forth. So, you know, it was more expansive. It was more organic. There was a live string orchestra and live guitars, and you know, a lot of the shows I worked on, if it was Jessica Jones or Homeland, I think sometimes there's a lot of concern about expositionally getting out of the gate so as not to lose viewers. So sometimes, you know, you're getting right into the story immediately. So this had a little bit more organic breathing space, which I really liked. And, you know, Liam Neeson and Jessica Jones or Jack Bauer or Kiefer Sutherland as Tom Kirkman. I mean, they're all heroes with little flaws, little challenges, little things that they got to do. So from that point of view, it was nice scoring just good, you know, a great story about a great character. And Liam Neeson he's always been a great actor. He really is quite, and even the most simplest of scenes, I learned that he did certain things with his costume that, you know, that made more sense in terms of the story. So I really admire that kind of specificity. And by the way, when I hear everybody here, like, you know, Anthony and Jake and Ruth and Jeff and Amanda, you're talking about your process, that specificity that you bring to it, I find just so interesting, because I think that translates to the most uneducated musical person. I think it comes right through. And when I'm hearing just all, like, now I haven't seen a lot of your shows, but now I can't wait to see it, because I have a little bit of behind the scenes look at how you guys approached it. So I really like these panels for that reason.
Agreed.
Don't start. I might start gushing about 24. So.
By the way, that came out 20 years ago in November.
I know.
That is how old I am. I mean, that is weird. I don't like that stat, but it's true. I think
I'm just a bit starstruck. That's all.
Well,
Yeah, same.
I remember being frozen to the spot seeing 24 for the first time. I just remember that feeling of like I couldn't move, and I felt so scared, like and it's the music, man. The music was just incredible. That's what makes
I'm writing it, wondering if I'd be hired for the next episode. So I
it
guess
has that panic feeling in it.
Yeah.
The music's really good, and the sound design for the countdown is like forever in my brain.
That's always
Well,
there.
that's, you know, that's really strange. My daughter does these TikTok videos all the time, and there's a countdown sound in the TikTok, and it's exactly the same sound. And every time I'm like, oh, 24, where's Jack? Where's Jack? It's really weird. But I will say that I felt the same way when I first met Sean. I was so starstruck. I was like, oh my God, it's Sean Callery.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the curse in reverse now, because I'm looking at all the work that everyone's doing here, and it's just like, yikes. And I'm not just blowing smoke here. I mean, I think you would agree. I hope you would agree. You're hearing a kind of writing in all over that is just so exceptional and so unique and so amazing. I mean, you just wouldn't have heard it. I just don't think that kind of, you can dismiss, go ahead and dismiss if you want, but it's true. I really do. I think live orchestras are everywhere, and the
that was a fly.
Oh, I thought you were saying get out of here.
No, it was a fly. It was actually a fly.
This is the problem. Anyway, sorry. Go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got to watch a live recording of Jeff's orchestra for Star Trek
Yes.
pre-COVID, which I'm glad I got to see before we were all split up into boxes. And but it was such an amazing thing that an actor, I had never been a part of that process. I just, you act, you see it very awkwardly in ADR without any music, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're all horrible and this is a really bad show, and then the music comes and you're like, oh my gosh, everything makes sense again. It's a really amazing experience.
By the way, I just got to ask, the cellist that's playing your part in Star Trek, Jeff, does the actor know anything about how to play the cello? Or does it have to be sort of learned just a little bit? Because I had to do that on Jessica Jones once, and man, when they delivered what she had done, I think even a non-musician knows when someone's not playing something. Now, as to Jake's point, there's very smart viewers out there, and it was yikes. It was, it had to be.
I don't know if the actor knew how to play, but they had a stand-in.
Oh, okay.
And I sent the scores to the stand-in who learned how to play it, and
man.
it looked very believable.
Awesome.
And whenever we were on the actor, you could never see the whole thing. So they shot it very meaningfully. So it really looked well. It really looked believable.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm relaxed now. Great. Thank you.
So was I.
So Jeff, you have worked on a few projects that, like Fargo, that have come from a feature, which won you an Emmy, which was inspired by Joel Coen's Oscar-winning film, of course, of the same name. And now recently you're working on CBS's Clarice, which is amazing and sounds really great, a spinoff of Oscar-winning Silence of the Lambs. So how do you come up with original music for these TV adaptations of, these really famous worlds?
It's very, I think the answer is very carefully. When I get into a project that has a sort of very iconic base to it, I have to be very careful to pay the correct amount of homage and yet still have the correct amount of self-identity, like new identity. It's not actually the same with Trek, which is more like a sound, and then I can pull on some of the original themes, like Alexander Courageous theme. With Fargo, there was no music that I didn't touch any of the music. It was really just about a vibe. Like, how do I stay in that world for that first season? In seasons 2, 3, and 4, I think that they gave me a lot of leeway to just sort of create a completely different thing, and the idea of what Fargo felt like was sort of ingrained in the viewer and didn't really have to stay in that world. With Clarice, it's a bit of a different story, because there's this theme that's very much beloved from that score. Howard Shore's score is just spectacular for that movie. Yeah. And there are legal issues involved as well, like whether or not you can actually use music that has been written before, who owns it, and all that stuff. So the decision was made that I couldn't really use any of the actual themes. So the idea was to still create this sort of modern classic sounding movie score, cinema score, and merge that with a horror score, because the movie did the same thing, and we needed to sort of transition that into how it would play on the small screen. So I do sort of a bit of both of those things, but in terms of the musicality of it, it had to be completely original, which is fine. I still feel like I'm standing in the shadow of giants, and I that happened to me on Fargo. It happened to me on Star Trek, and is now again happening to me on Clarice. And it's anxiety provoking is I think the best way to say it. Like I really do feel somehow like I don't know that I belong in this group of people. So I just sort of have to put my head down and write the music, and whatever ends up happening, and not really try not to look sideways at it. But it is I would say it is terrifying to be involved in a project that has such an iconic sound to it already, or an iconic musical base, and to try to reinvent what that is it's a tall task, and I stay up at night not being able to sleep thinking about that.
They do sound really good, and Clarice, you do get that feeling of the film, so you're doing great, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, Ruth, you mentioned that Bloodlands was filmed in Northern Ireland, and you recorded some of the music in Belfast and then some remotely while in lockdown. And I'm sure all of you, or most of you, had that experience where you had to sort of learn on the fly about how to record all separately. So were you able to adjust the scoring remotely during the pandemic, or did you stick to the original score and just try to make it work, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, no, I had to develop it because I literally did a load like really, really fast before Belfast. Literally kind of wrote in a couple of days and then went over there and just did 2 long days and got loads of the themes that I'd written, and then loads of sounds that I chopped up. So that really did form the basis of the kind of the sound world. And that's what I really love about starting a project and just sort of figuring out what those sounds are going to be. And then you've got your pool of stuff, rather than I use samples, like all the plugin stuff as well, but I just not so much. I just really like to make that core sound, and if it's like a whistle with the Irish stuff, I love like taking something like that and then disguising it. So I might have the whistle and stretch it a lot to make a pad out of the whistle or something. So it's just got this kind of haunting, eerie sound, and it feels like it's sort of from the place. And then so when I got all the stuff home and then we started the process, luckily there was a really good editor who put the themes in quite early on, and then in places that I didn't imagine they'd go, and kind of did half the job for me, which was really, really good. And then there was a lot of other stuff to write. So then I did work with, and I've got like musicians who I work with a lot. So we have the shorthand. I also have a cabin in my garden. So I'm up in the loft here. So we could still have people come into the cabin and be socially distanced, because this is a control room for the cabin in the garden. So that was
that's cool.
Really cool. So I had the drummer and the cello was there, and then the violinist was in Scotland because she's Scottish, and so that she wasn't going to come down anyway. And she did all the violins multi-tracked and sent them to me. And the great thing was, the more you get to know people and trust them, the better it gets. And the things that I didn't have to do the sessions, so that actually cut down my time. So I'd send her the stuff, and then she would play it, send it back, pop it in, then maybe a couple of tweaks or something, and it's done. So actually, in a way, it was quite efficient, rather than, I find, like here, we can all meet up and boom, you've done it, you haven't traveled anywhere. So I'm trying to see the good side of this, But yeah, it was hard though, sometimes, like not having that as much communication, and not always being in the same room. But then sometimes good with the directors, especially because it can get a bit intense sometimes when people are in the room.
Ruth, were there any garden tools in the shed that the percussionist decided to make part of your score? I'm just curious.
There is a metal grate that she was using, and my bangles were in it as well. Actually, we were like, we want some metal sound on this grate, and so we were just throwing the bangles on the grate.
So for those of us that are not British, what is a bangle?
Oh, really? You don't know bangle? This?
No. Is it just me? Am I the only person who doesn't know about
Jeff, I'm going to get you a Star Trek bangle.
I thought it was something you could eat. I totally
I thought it was, and I thought it was a band member from the 80s.
I call them bangles, so maybe it's just a.
What do you call them, Jeff?
Bracelets?
Yeah, bracelets.
I think if there's more than one, it seems like a bangle.
Bangles is like bang.
Yeah.
It makes a good
noise.
I'm gonna start using bangles now. That's gonna be in my vocabulary.
Yeah.
Okay, Sean, your main title theme for Jessica Jones earned you an Emmy Award. What's involved in making a memorable TV theme like the one you did for Jessica Jones? And what additional challenges does a composer face in a time where main titles are often drastically shortened?
Well, can I ask a first thought, best thought question to the panel? Favorite TV show theme without thinking? Can I start? Emily, do you have one for a theme that you just love? And by the way, we can't choose our own themes. Okay, so that's off the table.
I'm rewatching New Girl right now, so that's all I'm thinking about.
New Girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything?
Family Guy always makes me smile.
Family Guy. Got it.
Oh, yeah.
Knight Rider.
Knight Rider.
I guess the South Park. Oh, that's
South Park.
Yeah, South Park.
Oh, South Park's amazing.
I would say any Mike Post theme pre 1982.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
anything
Hill
that he
Street
did
Blues
pre
or
19
something.
Hill Street Blues is great.
Yeah.
Magnum PI was great.
So,
all of those. were great.
I grew up watching, the cartoons that reran in the 60s, and there was the Jetsons theme, which has anybody ever heard the Jetsons theme?
Amazing.
I would love to just perform that live once, first of all, because it would test me pianistically and the ability to just play. But it's those themes just had such a specificity, and everything that we're talking about has such a point of view and a specificity. And I'm old enough to remember that when you heard like the Green Acres theme or something, people would say, "Hey, it's starting." It was sort of like the first sort of audio branding in the main title. And when I was part of the peer group a few years ago, there was talk about dissolving the category. I'm really glad it remains, because I just think it's really the character of the show that you set up. And I know that we can speed past them and this and that. And I thought, so in answer to your question about the Jessica Jones theme, I have a little player piano downstairs with a floppy disk. And when I hit record, I just noodle and record just miles and miles of things. And then I came up finally with the dee-dee-dee, 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 with kind of a noir jazz kind of thing. And then I kind of threaded that. And then I had to take it up the food chain, which is a whole nother, process of approval. But I don't know if anybody ever watched the Showtime series Weeds, but they did something very clever in the second and third season, I think, which is that they had the same song, which was I think it was called Ticky Tack.
Little Houses, yeah.
and they put different artists each week to sing the main title. And what was really cool is that you stayed and watched the main title. It was still the theme, but it was done by someone different. And so I actually thought that was a really clever way of keeping the main title sort of fluid and active, so you don't stick by it. So I'm always looking for an opportunity, if there's ever a show to, like, if there's a main title, let's do something funky with the theme each week, so then people might hang around, because it actually became a thing I really enjoyed. And then they went back to it cost money, obviously, because then they went back to just the original theme. So I love themes, so I was very happy to get that nomination, and I'm glad they're here, and I hope they stay around for a long time. And there's great themes.
I agree. I can't agree with you more. I mean, to me, main title themes set the tone for the show, and too many times, it's just sort of a throwaway, like, oh, a 3-second card and put a boom on it and you're done. And you got a main title. And it's like, that doesn't really mean anything. So it's like, why do you even have to put the name of the show up? It doesn't even matter at that point,
Can you imagine someone winning an Emmy for main title theme for a 3-second experience? I mean, I would really want to hear that.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. But no, I'm old school. 6 Feet Under, we could have a whole hour just talking about main titles. So anyway.
Sean, was there any additional pressure on you, or was it different to write this one for Jessica Jones for Marvel versus something like 24 or the previous ones? Was is that any different?
I will tell you that with Jessica Jones, the thing that really changed the thing that changed for me is the woman who was the showrunner, Melissa Rosenberg. I think you live in your hair is brown or gray based on the strength and the resolve of the showrunner's vision. And I had a bit of protection from her, because she really wanted me to go for this neo-noir thing. And when it went up the chain, I think it kind of landed like, huh? And she goes, no, this is it. This is, someone has to be your advocate in addition to yourself. I had her as a strong advocate. And then when it got nominated, it was really the icing on the cake, because it kind of, for her, said, see, I was right. But there have been other times when you're working on a theme, and I'm not trying to put any showrunner down, but sometimes a showrunner that doesn't have some ground and some security of themselves, you can feel a little exposed, and they send you back with 18 different things to do. I don't know if this has happened to you guys, but it certainly has happened to me. And you just got to say, look, I got to answer to one lane. Please keep me in one lane so I can really go for something. And I had the confidence to go for the Jessica Jones things because I felt I had that protection, to be quite honest with you. So,
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's.
Anthony, we'll pop back to you. I was actually just watching an interview with Emerald and Carrie Mulligan, and Carrie said that when Emerald first, approached her about everything, she sent her a playlist of songs that she wanted for the movie, or that were, inspiring for the movie. And Toxic from Britney Spears was on there twice. And Emerald said that, she's really inspired by pop music and really wanted to pay homage to it, and in a serious way and not a fun way. And the way you guys worked Toxic into the score was just so memorable and amazing. So can you talk about specifically the way you use Toxic, and how that came to be and how you made it your own?
For sure. Before I answer that, I didn't want to interrupt Sean just then, but it's so cool to hear these great TV composers of my generation, or generation above me, talk about themes and main titles, because it is such an amazing thing. And I remember the days of watching, getting revved up for when you'd had to wait a whole week for the show, and it's so exciting. And unfortunately, it is just an aspect of our binge culture, the skip thing. So anyway, it's cool to hear that you guys really still value the titles, because the skip button is, I mean, we've all done it because you just want to find out what's happening next, but it's, anyway. But sorry, back to the question. I mean, Emerald's sort of vision for the score, when I first signed on the project, I thought, gosh, is this going to be kind of I knew that the pop music was going to be play such a central role. So I thought, is the score going to be some kind of abstract psychological distortion of pop music? So is it going to be lots of mangled, pop sounds? And Emerald really wanted a classic sort of thriller vibe to the score. So there's sort of two kinds of music in the movie. There's the pop music, and then there's the kind of more haunting and effecty string score. But what was interesting about Toxic is that we had this idea to basically merge those two worlds. So it's the kind of bridge between, the pop songs obviously are used, you're really aware of them because often used very ironically, lyrically it's a really strong choice, and nobody's gonna go, oh, I didn't notice the songs in the movie. I mean, they're really bold in their choices, and it really helped to sort of sell the comedy and the kind of grotesque social commentary of what's happening in the movie. But so Toxic was the thing about Toxic is I have to say, I'm getting the accolade for having been a part of this, but the song itself is one of the best songs of our lifetime. I think it's one of the best pop songs. It's such a great string riff, so it really lends itself in its essence to be put in in the string arrangement. It's such because if that riff was originally for a different instrument, you'd hear it and you go, oh, that's cool, I guess, which is obviously done a lot. But the fact that the original color in the Britney track is strings, really is kind of the job, the heavy lifting of the job to subvert it is really done for you. I mean, obviously, but I think why people really enjoyed the scene is that taking something that's so fun, and then also it has such a strong lyric, and a lyric that you can associate so clearly with the movie. So taking that and then sort of almost like a Trojan horse, disguising it in in a scene initially. To most musicians, they go, oh yeah, that's toxic right away, but that sort of subversion initially is kind of like a little disarming, because it's in such a kind of grotesque world. So what we did is I did a sort of string quartet version that was quite simple with lots of effects, and then we slowed it down. And that, that the fact that it was slowed down as opposed to played slowly was such an important psychological aspect. So many of the things I'm working on, I'm working on something right now that I'm going, okay, I've got all the things, I've got the notes, I've got the theme, but the essence that's going to make it work is the psychology of how you deliver it. So does it, so that's a bit abstract. How do I explain that better? Yeah, I mean, everybody here knows it's like, sometimes it's taking the simplest thing, but just presenting it with the right psychology attached to it. I'm being fun, but screwed up, and delivering that. So it was really, I mean, I'm really excited that that's become such a kind of, people are talking about that as a very iconic part of the movie. And it's all Brittany, really. Well, it's actually who, I'm not sure who the songwriters are who wrote the song. I know I've got them written down somewhere, but
Not Max Martin.
Yeah,
Max Martin.
It's just a phenomenal track, and and married to such a kind of haunting scene. So really fun to do.
You said what was you did to it. You slowed it down. I'm really intrigued. So you played it and then slowed it down, and that's what gave it that feeling.
Yeah, and then we just mangled a load of effects. Basically, it was kind of, it wasn't the most intricate or elegant process by any means. I mean, it was just kind of experimenting, and
messy's always best.
Yeah, exactly. The irony being that after the fact you go, God, I wish I'd spent longer on this. I wish I'd had more time to like do the most clever things ever. And I suppose it's just a reminder of, like, again, that visceral raw psychology is the thing that's going to communicate to the audience above all of our technical fiddlings.
Yeah, that's what connects, I reckon.
Yeah. So yeah, but no, it's a cool kickoff to the final act of the movie for everyone who's seen it.
Amazing. That's really interesting. Okay, Amanda, one of your characters, that we were just talking about, Marceline, happens to love music in Adventure Time Distant Lands special Obsidian, and plays the bass. So, you touched on it, but can you talk about how that narrative factor influenced your choices and her theme and elsewhere?
Yeah, so, her bass emits sound waves like most instruments, but they're able to kill these like evil doers kind of just romping about. So yes, every time she kind of was like wielding her bass, I'd have some sort of score cue that was very kind of like bass centric, just kind of an anticipation of her about to like just destroy these creatures. But yeah, a lot of her cues were just orchestral, but very, very much like grunge. She's kind of like has this like punk roots, so kind of like grungy punk rock vibe, and a lot of distortion and pedals, and it was a lot of fun.
Cool. Okay, and Jake, this is the last question. You recently scored Disney's Flora and Ulysses. Can you share a little bit about your musical approach to scoring a superhero who happens to be a squirrel? How does it differ from, a Marvel superhero or something like that?
It's funny. I read a review on the film the other day, and I think it said, the movie acts as a gateway drug for kids to Marvel. It's with a Marvel film. I have not scored one, but with the ones that I've watched, you have your antagonist, but it's always like a bad guy, so to speak. And there's always our heroes trying to avenge themselves. And versus this film, which is much more family centric, and it's almost like instead of scoring what we're seeing, it's like you're scoring each individual character's kind of the way that they're seeing themselves almost. So there are a couple of moments where there are these superhero tropes where, like, you know, Ulysses grabs an M&M and he goes like this and then just eats it. So there's like this kind of thing that's like an homage to Superman that's very classic sounding. When we have these couple of moments where, you know, we're trying to bring it, relate it back to a classic superhero. Flora is just convinced that he is and wants to believe it so much. And what this squirrel does is it helps the entire family believe in themselves and in their core group. And it really brings this family back together. The movie is very touching. But in regards to actually scoring the characters themselves, when I was discussing with the director, Lena, we went back and forth as to, like, is it really going to be like a classic superhero theme, or, you know, what is it? And she kept saying he has this kind of funk, this like swagger to him. And when she said the word swagger, I was like, okay, I got it. This is kind of like this funky groove type thing. And Amanda, like, I loved how you were talking about like the indie and the electronic like combination, and this like this indie-tronica type of thing. Like, we were listening to a lot of like Passion Pit or like Phoenix and bands like that, where it's just a little bit more raw than like straight up EDM. But it just, I don't know, it just gives us like tactile kind of lo-fi feel to it. And it was that kind of combined with the orchestra, you know, I'm playing these big set pieces and stuff like that, versus this, like, everything is so heavy. It was just like a Marvel movie, but with a big smile on top of it.
Right. Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, do you guys feel like when you leave a movie, you know, leave a project, do you feel like you mentioned, Sean, that, you know, you admired Liam Neeson's work. Like, do you feel connected to these like characters in a way that feels almost intimate, because it's just with, like, you know, you're watching it after they've filmed, so you're creating like your own version of who they are, and like, how do you you know, how do you let that go? And I, you know, you have such a relationship with this squirrel character, even though, you know, it's an animation. Like, how do you feel in relation to your characters, and like, what's that experience like to sort of get to know them as their character and as their, you know, as a real human?
Well, I would like Liam Neeson and a squirrel with Amanda's bass to be that. I want that greenlit right now. I mean,
Yes.
I have to, you know, for me, I will say one thing. This has sort of happened to me as I go over time. I so admire acting. I mean, I so admire the work of actors. And there was a character in 24 once who played a vice president. His name is Logan. He kind of had the Nixonian nose and is played by a guy named Greg Gitson, and he's a theater actor. And he had a scene where he had to walk from one room to another in complete silence, and he was going to go kill himself. He decided not to, but the camera followed him. And I was like, why is this interesting? Why is this holding me so, you know, because then another actor could do it. It just doesn't land. So I took him aside at a rap party. I never met him before. I said, do you remember that scene? He goes, yeah, I do remember that scene. I said, what are you doing? Like, why is that interesting to me? Why was I scored it in a very, you know, the word haunted it's been said through our sessions here, our session today. I just followed what I was feeling. And he said he made a decision before he joined the show that he made a decision that he wrote in his mind a character that he had a son that had died, and he and his wife had a shared tragedy. And he held on to this amulet that he had in his hand when he walked across that scene. He would like hold on to it. He had this whole subtext. He had this whole subtext of his approach. I didn't know a thing about it, but it kind of got to me from his acting. I don't know, yeah, Emily, if this is your process as well, but when you were all talking about what inspires you and the way you design your colors and the stretching the strings, I'm like, wow, that's just so cool. I just find this these are like little things that I'll feel, but now you're talking about your specificity, and that that's the thing I take from the shows, is when I come across really specific creative choices, whether it's an actor or a set designer or something like that, that's the stuff I really miss. I really miss those people, and some of them remain friends, even though we don't have anything in common except working on a show, but they have this sort of nuttiness. They're nuts. We're nuts. We're all little nuts, right? I mean, a bit, little. Sorry, it was a long answer, but that was a great question.
All right. Well, anyone else have any thoughts about that or anything else? We have 5 more minutes if we want to just.
I have a question. For those of us who have done the remote recording with more with individuals than with orchestra, have you always been supervising the sessions, or have you been able to send stuff out and let the player kind of bring some of their unique talents, or be like, this is what I'm after, I'm interested in what you got, and then send a few things back, and then you can kind of do your thing to it, keeping the main intent, as opposed to if you're sitting there at a session with a small band, you have your 5 players, you're like, no, let's tweak this, then you're kind of running the session. Has there been any sort of difference that you guys have done, just out of curiosity?
I mean, for me, it depends on the player. There are players that I could just send a score to, and I know in about 7 hours I'll get something back that's absolutely perfect and great, and maybe even unexpected. And then there are other players that maybe I don't know as well, that I would have to Skype in and talk to and sort of hear the take, and then say, no, do it a little bit more like this or a little bit more like that. I think it all depends. Yeah. That's my take. A little bit of both. There are four other people who have done exactly the same thing, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah, just the same thing you were saying, Jeff. But I think some of the gems I've discovered are just kind of like giving someone a larger framework just to play around with their instrument and just make weird noises. And you come back with some stuff that's really beautiful that you can just kind of keep as in a library and maybe use it for something else. Or but yeah, I don't know, it's fun.
Sometimes it helps. Oh, go on, Anthony.
No, go ahead, Ruth. No,
I was just going to say, like, you have to keep going with people, don't you, to get them to push into those places. Like, it's quicker if they're in the room. I was a guy playing a penny whistle once, and he just kept playing tunes on it, and I just wanted him to play it broken. I just wanted him to split the note. I just had to keep on, like, at him to just like, no, just play it more really bad. And eventually he did this cracked, beautiful note, which was horrible, but it was this perfect sound for this little old lady who was actually the devil, but she looked really sweet. But when you put this horrible broken penny whistle on her, she was the devil. It was like, it was worth getting out of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I think how much space to give somebody is something I'm thinking a lot recently. I mean, I'm so thankful that for the most part, directors I work with do give us a good amount of space, and that they don't come to you with like, here's my wish list and I want these sounds and these instruments and that's it. And, go and enact my exact vision that may or may not be the best when actually constructed. It's our job to construct it. So I love having that space. And so I do, I suppose the hope is that if you give somebody enough space with the caveat, like, please make it wonderful, they will go ahead and go, oh my gosh, okay, well, let me really think about this. And whether that's a reality in session recording times and, all of that is hard to know. I guess normally musicians are more contractual, aren't they? I mean, it's like, you have them for this amount of time, and ultimately they stop playing at a certain amount of time, and it's up to us to really steer the creative direction. So yeah, it's a really interesting question. But yeah, I love giving people space because I love being given space. So I kind of, it's a creative respect that I think it's really worth us as composers trying to give the musicians we work with. But yeah, as Jeff and Amanda have said, like, it just depends if you've built up that relationship with them, and you trust that they have enough information from you.
It's so fun to be surprised by people, isn't it? Like,
yes,
when they surprise you, that's the best thing, because I don't think I'm I wouldn't think I could do a score just like on my own. That would be boring. I think of myself as collaborating with these other amazing artists that come in, you know, and that's what makes it fun. The surprises that they bring.
I had a vocalist on Homeland from Montreal. She was Iranian, and I had this line sort of fleshed out on a piano, and they had to go from this to this. And I just said, I'm going from here to here, and I knew it. I knew emotionally I wanted to be in a certain. And I just said, can you just let yourself feel whatever's happening, you know? And I wasn't with her when she did it. So she sent me back takes, and it was beautiful because there were so many good takes that you just didn't know how to. At that point, you get agoraphobic because you have so many interesting choices to make, or sometimes you get stuff back that's just like, wow, I don't know if I can. You know, sometimes I get like I sent a direction out, and then you beat yourself up because you're like, God, did I tell that person the right thing? But then all of a sudden you sit with it a bit, and then okay, there's something here. So it's that wonderful little, I love it and I'm miserable at the same time. You know?
It definitely reminds me of like the director actor dynamic, right? Like if they over direct you, you kind of feel a little bit, you know, put in a box, and you can't really let your own take on things. So I always appreciate at least one chance to do it, you know, in an inspired, like personal way, and then kind of fit back into what the, you know, main vision is. And I think that's also goes back to Sean saying like a strong showrunner, a strong composer, like, you know, these really specific visions help everyone sort of tell a very, you know, great story. And I know, Sean, you also said you don't know how actors do what we do. And I can say on behalf of all actors, we do not know how you do what you guys all do. So it's been really, really fun listening to you all talk about your different experiences and processes, and very inspiring, I'm sure, for a lot of people who are wanting to be where you are one day. So thank you all so much for giving your time and answering all these questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emily, so much. Thank you for moderating for us.
Yeah.
And thanks to WonderCon again, and Jana and Alex at Rhapsody PR for organizing this again and for making it happen despite you know, COVID stuff. So and thanks for everyone who's watching at home. We're sending love, stay safe, and all the best.
Woo.